Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
hmm
Today, we're taking a closer look at Wilmar International Limited.
Okay.
I was reading their annual report, and they have over 1,000
Wow.
manufacturing plants
Really?
across 32 countries.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Talk about a global footprint, right?
Absolutely.
So we're going to be looking at, how their different business segments are doing, their growth strategy, and what it all means for their shareholders.
Yeah.
So,
It's really interesting how Wilmar manages such a diverse
mhm,
portfolio of businesses. I mean,
mhm.
they're in everything from palm oil plantations to sugar refining,
Wow.
even to, food parks in China.
Yeah, so,
It's pretty amazing.
yeah, that's a new one.
And that kind of it allows them to adapt to these changing markets and kind of seize opportunities across the entire food value chain.
Yeah, and they've got four key business segments, right?
That's right.
Tropical oils, oil seeds and grains, sugar, and then plantations and sugar milling. So let's start with the tropical oil segment.
Okay.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, Wilmar is actually a leading processor and merchandiser of palm and lauric oils.
Okay.
But, this segment actually faced some headwinds in 2023.
Oh, really?
They saw weaker margins, mainly in their mid and downstream operations. And a lot of that was due to the global economic slowdown,
Right.
that impacted their profitability a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's feeling that.
Yeah.
So even a company as large as Wilmar
Right.
is not immune to these global trends.
Exactly. But, one thing that helps them
Yeah.
is their vertical integration.
Right.
They control a large part of their supply chain from the plantation to the packaging,
That's a lot.
and that gives them leverage.
Okay.
It helps to kind of stabilize their earnings even when prices are fluctuating like crazy.
Mhm.
That's a key part of their strategy.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about their oil seeds and grains division? They had kind of a wild ride this year, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
They're processing soybeans, making edible oils, which,
Mhm.
is a really important part of the food system.
Absolutely.
What were some of the factors that affected their performance?
Well, the first half of 2023 was actually pretty rough for them.
Oh.
They saw weak crush margins.
Fresh margins.
Yeah, so that's basically the profit they make from processing oil seeds.
Okay.
And that really squeezed their earnings.
Mhm.
And a lot of that came down to lower demand from livestock farmers.
Okay.
They were facing high feed costs, and soybean prices were also high. So it was kind of this chain reaction
Yeah.
across the whole agricultural sector.
Yeah, I see.
Everything's connected.
Right.
But, things actually picked up for them in the second half.
Oh, good.
Yeah, those crush margins rebounded,
Right.
and they were able to offset those earlier losses.
Yeah.
And this really just highlights their agility. They were able to leverage their global sourcing network and their distribution channels to kind of ride those waves and adapt to those shifting market conditions.
Yeah, and I noticed in the report, they're not just sitting back and waiting for things to happen. They're actively expanding into new markets like Ghana and India,
Exactly.
adding all this capacity for, refining, crushing, and even specialty fats manufacturing.
That's a really smart move
Yeah.
because those regions have growing populations and their incomes are rising,
Right.
which means there's going to be more demand for food products.
Yeah.
And Wilmar is getting ahead of that curve.
Absolutely. And, they're also, I was reading about this, they're transitioning to cleaner energy,
Oh, yeah.
installing solar panels on their refineries in Malaysia.
I saw that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool, right?
It's a win-win. They reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, it lowers their environmental impact, and it also helps them control their energy costs in the long run.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about their sugar division. This one was actually a bright spot for them, right?
It was, yeah.
They had a pretty good year.
They did, yeah.
So what drove that success?
Well, Wilmar is one of the world's largest sugar producers and refiners.
Wow.
And in 2023, their expertise in merchandising really paid off.
Merchandising.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're strategically buying and selling sugar to kind of take advantage of those market fluctuations.
Yeah.
And it really shows their deep understanding of global supply and demand dynamics.
Yeah, but sugar prices can be, anyone who follows the market knows they're notoriously volatile.
Right?
How do they manage that risk?
Well, they're diversified.
Okay.
So they source sugar from a bunch of different countries, which helps reduce their exposure to any regional weather shocks or any policy changes.
Mhm.
And their size, gives them bargaining power when they're negotiating prices with suppliers.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, their plantation and sugar milling segment,
Right.
palm oil prices were down this year.
They were, yeah.
So that must have put some pressure on this division.
Yeah.
How did they manage that?
Well, palm oil is a core commodity for Wilmar, so when prices dip, it directly impacts their profitability.
Okay.
Their plantation and sugar milling segment actually saw a decrease in their pre-tax profits for this very reason.
Yeah.
It really just shows how sensitive this part of their business is to those global market forces.
Right.
But, they didn't just sit back and watch this happen. They actually made a pretty smart move
Okay.
by selling off part of their stake in Cosumar, which is a Moroccan sugar company.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that divestment actually generated a gain of $231 million for them.
Wow.
It shows they're financial savvy.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to rebalance their portfolio if it's going to strengthen their overall position.
Absolutely. And it shows they're actively managing their assets to get the best returns.
Exactly.
I also noticed they're planning to reduce their capital expenditures.
Right.
And improve their operational efficiencies. That seems like a sign of a company that's really laser focused on, squeezing every bit of value out of every dollar.
It's essential, especially when you have economic uncertainty like we have this year. It's like tightening your belt, but still investing strategically for the future.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about their different business segments. Let's take a step back now.
Okay.
And look at their overall financial performance.
You sure?
What are some of the key takeaways from their 2023 financials?
Well, I think the big story here is one of resilience.
Okay.
Despite the global economic slowdown, they've managed to stay profitable. They've maintained a strong financial foundation.
Okay.
So let's start by talking about revenue.
Okay, revenue. That's always the first thing people want to know.
It is, yeah.
What does it tell us?
Well, their revenue for 2023 came in at US $67.16 billion.
Okay.
Which is actually slightly lower than the previous year, reflecting that global economic slowdown we've been talking about.
So not necessarily a sign of weakness in their core business, but more just a reflection of what's happening in the broader economy.
Exactly. And despite that slight revenue dip, they still had a really healthy EBITDA.
EBITDA. For those of us who aren't, financial experts, what is that exactly?
Yeah, so EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Okay.
And it's basically a way to measure a company's operating profitability.
Okay.
So for Wilmar, it was US $3.96 billion.
Okay, so what's the significance of that number?
Well, it tells us that even in a tough year like this, they were still able to generate a lot of cash from their operations.
Yeah.
It's a sign of their underlying strength. You know how efficient they are.
That's good to hear. What about their net profit?
Yeah, so their net profit, which is what's left after all their expenses, interest, taxes, all that stuff, came in at US $1.52 billion.
Okay.
Which, again, is a pretty solid performance given the economic headwinds.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about dividends.
Okay.
That's always a hot topic for shareholders.
It is.
Did Wilmar maintain their dividend payout?
They did, yeah. They kept the dividend per share steady at $0.17, which I think really shows their commitment to rewarding their shareholders even when times are tough.
Right.
It also suggests that they're confident about their ability to keep generating those consistent cash flows.
Yeah, that consistency is definitely a good thing for investors.
Right.
Now, beyond dividends, what other steps are they taking to create value for their shareholders?
Well, they've got a kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
First, they're investing in these growth initiatives.
Okay.
Like those food parks we were talking about in China.
Yeah, the food parks.
And their expansion into specialty fats production.
Okay.
These are strategic bets that are aimed at tapping into these new markets and diversifying their products.
That's kind of like planting seeds for future growth while they're also kind of nurturing their existing businesses.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
And they're also not afraid to make those strategic divestments like we saw with the sale of their stake in Cosumar.
Right.
To kind of optimize their portfolio and free up some capital for other ventures.
Right.
Now let's talk about their balance sheet.
Okay.
What can you tell us about their financial position?
So their balance sheet actually paints a pretty healthy picture.
Okay.
At the end of 2023, their total assets were US $61.81 billion.
Okay.
And their total liabilities were US $41.64 billion.
So their assets outweigh their liabilities.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, right?
It is, yeah. It means they've got a really solid financial foundation and a good cushion to absorb any unexpected bumps in the road.
Okay. But they do have a fair amount of debt, right?
Yeah, they do. Their net debt, which is their total debt minus cash, was around US $17.65 billion.
Okay.
But you have to look at that in the context of their earnings and cash flow. So their debt-to-equity ratio, which measures how much debt they're using compared to shareholder equity, was 0.88 at the end of 2023.
Is that a red flag? Should we be worried about that?
Well, it is a little bit higher than their historical average, but it's still within a reasonable range for a company in their industry.
Okay.
They seem to be using debt strategically to fuel their growth without taking on too much risk.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's move on to the cash flow statement.
Okay.
Why is this statement so important when we're evaluating a company?
Well, the cash flow statement basically tells us how much cash the company is generating from its operations and how they're using that cash.
Okay.
It gives us a more tangible view of their financial health than just looking at the income statement,
Okay.
which can sometimes be influenced by different accounting practices.
So what does Wilmar's cash flow statement tell us?
Well, their cash flow statement for 2023 actually highlights their ability to generate really strong cash flow even when the economic environment's not great. They brought in about US $3.2 billion from their operating activities,
Okay.
which is mainly from selling their products and services.
So their core business is doing well, generating a lot of cash.
It is, yeah.
What are they doing with all that cash?
So they're using it wisely.
Okay.
They're investing in future growth. They're rewarding their shareholders, and they're also managing their debt.
Okay.
So their capital expenditures, which is basically what they're investing in, things like new facilities and equipment, were about US $2.28 billion.
That's a pretty big investment.
It is, yeah. But it shows that they're not just focused on short-term profits.
Right.
They're building for the long term.
Yeah.
And they also paid out about US $1.3 billion in dividends to shareholders.
So they're keeping that commitment to sharing the rewards with investors.
Exactly. And they also used about US $1.3 billion to pay down some of their debt,
Okay.
which again just shows their financial discipline.
That's good. Now let's talk about free cash flow. I've heard that's a really important metric when you're trying to understand a company's financial strength.
Yeah, it is. So free cash flow is basically the cash that a company has left over after paying all its operating expenses and capital expenditures.
Okay.
It's the cash they can use to pay investors, pay off debt, or even reinvest in the business.
Okay.
It gives them a lot of flexibility.
So what does Wilmar's free cash flow look like?
Well, in 2023, their free cash flow was about US $920 million.
Okay.
Which is a pretty healthy amount.
Yeah.
It shows they're generating a significant amount of cash beyond what they need to run the business and invest in growth.
Okay, so they're profitable.
Mm-hmm.
They're generating strong cash flow.
Yeah.
They're managing their debt responsibly.
Right.
What about their plans to create shareholder value going forward?
Well, they're continuing with their multifaceted approach.
Oh, yeah.
Their proposed final dividend of several $0.11 per share will be brought up to their shareholders at their upcoming meeting,
Okay.
bringing the total for 2023 to $8.17.
Okay. And what about share buybacks? Are they planning on repurchasing any shares?
So their share purchase committee does have the authority to buy back shares
Okay.
up to a certain limit. And this can potentially bump up the value of the remaining shares for shareholders.
So it's another way of returning value to shareholders.
Exactly.
Like they're saying, hey, we believe in our company and we're putting our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about corporate governance.
Okay.
Why is this so important for investors?
Well, it all comes down to trust. You want to be investing in companies that are run ethically and transparently.
Right.
Companies where the management team is accountable to the shareholders and is really acting in their best interests.
Absolutely. So how does Wilmar measure up?
Well, they've got a pretty strong track record on corporate governance.
Okay.
They're committed to transparency, accountability, and doing things the right way.
Okay.
They've got a board of directors made up of experienced and independent individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And these individuals provide oversight and guidance to the management team.
But they did have some changes on their board recently, right?
They did, yeah.
What happened there?
So they welcomed 2 new non-executive and independent directors to the board in 2023.
Okay.
Ms. Jessica Chim
Okay.
and Dr. Chung-Xian Louis.
Okay.
And they both bring some really valuable expertise to the table.
So what can you tell us about their backgrounds?
Well, Ms. Chim is actually a recognized expert in ESG matters,
Okay.
which is environmental, social, and governance. So that aligns perfectly with the growing focus on sustainability from investors. And Dr. Chung has a lot of experience in investments, capital markets, and acquisitions,
Okay.
which are really key areas for Wilmar's growth strategy.
So it seems like they're really trying to strengthen their board with experts in areas that are critical for their future success.
Exactly.
What about their board committees? What role do they play in corporate governance?
So they have several different board committees
Okay.
that provide specialized oversight in areas like audit, risk management, nominations, and remuneration.
Okay.
And these committees help ensure that the company is managed effectively
Okay.
and that any risks are identified and dealt with properly.
So they've got a solid board, they've got these robust committees,
Right.
a commitment to ethical conduct.
Right.
That's all good.
Yeah.
But I can't ignore the elephant in the room.
Okay.
There were some legal proceedings in China mentioned in the annual report.
Right.
Should investors be worried about that?
Well, you're talking about those allegations of contract fraud and bribery
Yeah.
against Yihai Guangzhou Oils and Grains Industries, Ltd., which is a Wilmar subsidiary in China.
Yeah, that's the one. Should we be worried?
Well, it's important to be aware of any legal proceedings that could impact the company.
Right.
But Wilmar has said that they believe these allegations are baseless.
Okay.
And they're cooperating fully with the authorities.
Okay.
So it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. A developing situation.
Right.
Investors need to monitor it.
Exactly.
Now let's zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
The agribusiness sector faces a lot of challenges these days.
It does, yeah.
What are some of the big ones facing Wilmar and the industry in general?
Well, climate change is a huge one.
Okay.
We're seeing these more frequent and intense extreme weather events,
Right.
which can disrupt agricultural production,
Yeah.
lead to price volatility, supply chain disruptions. It's a big deal.
And with their reliance on palm oil production,
Right.
Wilmar's pretty exposed to these climate risks, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
Palm oil is a major crop for them.
Right.
And a lot of it's grown in regions that are particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts.
Yeah.
They're trying to mitigate these risks through sustainable agriculture practices,
Right.
but it's definitely an ongoing challenge for them.
What other challenges do they face?
Well, geopolitical tensions and rising protectionism are also creating a lot of uncertainty
Yeah, I can see it.
in the global market.
Yeah. These things can lead to trade wars, disruptions to global supply chains, which can definitely impact a company like Wilmar.
Absolutely.
They have operations all over the world.
It's a complex landscape they're navigating.
It really is.
And we also can't forget about the ever-evolving consumer landscape.
Right.
Consumers are becoming more and more discerning about their food choices.
Yeah, they are. They want healthier options. They want things that are more sustainable and ethically sourced.
Right.
It's a whole new set of expectations for companies to meet.
And they've got to adapt quickly.
They do.
Otherwise, they're going to be left behind.
Exactly. If they don't keep up with those changing preferences, they're going to lose market share to their competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've talked about the challenges. What about the opportunities?
Okay.
Are there any bright spots out there for Wilmar?
Well, despite all those challenges, there are definitely opportunities for growth and innovation.
Okay, good.
The global population is growing.
And urbanization is happening really rapidly,
Yeah.
especially in emerging markets.
Right.
And that's driving up the demand for food and agricultural products.
Yeah.
So this is a huge growth opportunity for companies like Wilmar.
Right.
They have the scale and the reach to serve these growing markets.
And they're already making moves, like we said, expanding into markets like Africa and India.
Exactly. They're strategically positioning themselves to take advantage of this trend.
Yeah. And this growing demand for sustainable and ethically sourced products,
Right.
that's creating a lot of new opportunities
It is,
for
yeah.
companies that can meet those expectations.
Right.
And it seems like Wilmar is doing that.
They are, yeah. They're investing in sustainable agriculture practices.
Right.
Reducing their environmental footprint, promoting ethical sourcing throughout their supply chain.
Okay, so there's a lot to consider. We've got a company navigating a complex and evolving landscape, facing all these challenges, but also finding new opportunities. What's your final verdict on Wilmar as a company?
Well, I think Wilmar's undoubtedly a leader in the global agribusiness sector. They have a really solid financial foundation, a diverse portfolio of businesses,
Right.
and a clear commitment to sustainability.
Yeah.
They're in a great position to take advantage of this growing demand for food and agricultural products, especially in these emerging markets.
But like we discussed, there are some risks.
Of course.
Right.
No investment is without risk.
Yeah.
But I think their track record of success, their strategic investments, and their focus on adapting suggests they're pretty well equipped to navigate those risks
Okay.
and generate long-term value for their shareholders.
But like with any investment, It's crucial for individuals to do their own research.
Oh, absolutely.
Really understand the risks and the potential rewards before making any decisions.
Couldn't agree more. You got to be informed and make decisions that align with your own investment goals,
Yeah.
your own risk tolerance.
Right. Yeah, it's been a really fascinating look into this world of agribusiness.
It has.
Walmart's a major player. I mean,
Yeah.
their decisions have these ripple effects
Yeah.
across the entire global food system. It's crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, they're not just along for the ride, they're actually shaping the industry.
Right.
Their size and their commitment to, being innovative, that makes them a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. But something that's been kind of on my mind throughout our conversation is the human element.
Yeah,
We've been talking a lot about numbers and strategies.
right.
But at the end of the day, it's people who make a company run.
It is, yeah.
So how does Wilmar approach managing their workforce?
That's a really important point and often overlooked.
Yeah.
Wilmar has about 100,000 employees worldwide.
Wow.
And they really understand that investing in their people is critical for their long-term success.
Yeah, and we saw some examples of that in their annual report.
We did, yeah.
They talked about training programs, career development initiatives, a focus on diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. It's not just about checking boxes for them.
Right.
It's about fostering this culture of, growth and opportunity for their employees. They want their employees to develop their skills and really contribute, their unique talents to the company's success.
Right, and their commitment to sustainability.
Right.
It doesn't stop at their own operations, right?
It doesn't, no.
They're thinking about their impact on the communities where they work.
Exactly. Their sustainability efforts go beyond their own company walls.
Okay.
They extend to those relationships with smallholder farmers,
Okay.
the local communities, the workers throughout their supply chain.
Right.
They're working to empower these stakeholders,
Okay.
promote fair labor practices, and ensure that their operations are beneficial to everyone involved.
So it's like a really holistic approach,
It is, yeah.
recognizing that their success is intertwined with the well-being of these people and communities they work with.
Exactly. They understand that long-term value creation isn't just about financial performance. It's also about creating a positive social and environmental impact.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up here,
Mm-hmm.
what's your main takeaway?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want our listeners to remember about Wilmar?
Well, I think the main thing is that Wilmar is a company that's constantly moving forward.
Okay.
They're adapting to this ever-changing world.
All right.
They're investing in innovation,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of sustainability. I mean, they're a company worth watching, not just for their potential financial returns,
Right.
but also for their potential to really reshape the agribusiness landscape and make a positive difference.
Absolutely. And for our listeners who are shareholders or potential investors,
Right.
it's important to stay engaged, ask questions,
Absolutely.
hold them accountable for their commitment.
Yeah, it's an ongoing dialogue. We all have a role to play in shaping a more sustainable and equitable future.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Wilmar International Limited.
Yeah.
Hopefully our listeners found this exploration as insightful as I have.
I hope so.
It's a complex company operating in a really dynamic industry,
It is, yeah.
but they've definitely got a lot going for them.
We do.
And if you want to learn more about Wilmar, you can find their annual report, their sustainability reports, and other information on their website.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
Well, it's been a pleasure diving deep with you. Thanks for joining us, everybody.